There's enough evidence to support that the new classified map will be playing as Ultimus, with one exception. Rather than having Dr. Richtofen on the crew, we'll instead have Dr. Gersh. Let me list the reasons. First, Dr. Monty's new radio on Ascension says that Dr. Gersh used to travel with the other three while Richtofen was off somewhere at the time.
Ascension, the Russian cosmodrome. I know Nikolai can be a bit down on Soviet technology, but the Ruskies really pulled one out of the bag that time. The Ascension group built a bloody great rocket. It actually worked a treat, too. Do you remember Gersh? Bald guy? He fought alongside you for a while. I think Richtofen was off somewhere at the time. Anyway, Gersh ran into a little bit of dimensional distortion. Honestly, why do you insist in meddling with stuff you don't understand? Of course, all their experiments just stirred the reality soup even more. You ended up fighting monkeys. Space monkeys at that. As I'm sure you know, monkeys are thieving little bastards. Give them half a chance and they'll nick anything that isn't nailed down. So, in answer to a question Richtofen once asked, I don't love a monkey.
Secondly, on the Ascension poster release for Black Ops, Dr. Gersh was there instead of Richtofen. Also, Takio was holding the Winter's Howl, which can only be found on 5. In other words, they were returning from 5 and headed to Ascension. This would also explain why Richtofen is the only one wearing a spacesuit on the map. He was on the moon, while the other guys were at 5. Reason number 3, in Kino der Toten, there are 5 portraits, with Richtofen being the predominant one. The silhouetted man in the 5th picture is Dr. Gersh. He's bald, and he's missing because he's hit dimensional distortion. As a side note, Dr. Gersh is essentially set outside of the whole story, floating through the ether. He realizes when the concurrence is happening, and he is an important part of the Ascension Protocol in Gorod Krovi, which is why a quote from Shadows of Evil says, "The Formless One will be their downfall," but that's a whole nother idea. Topher Titan. I'm convinced that Ultimus left through the rift on the moon in 2025, ended up in a fractured dimension of the Pentagon that we see in the Chronorium, where McNamara is hiding in the closet. That could be the point of introducing that Easter egg of McNamara to set up this map from Revelations. Satellite Jones.
This is Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. I am transmitting on a secure channel in the most dire of circumstances. The Pentagon is under attack from an unknown enemy. As of this moment, I am safely ensconced inside a janitor's closet. Unfortunately, I fear the President and the VIPs may not have found similar safe haven. From what I have observed, our attackers may be blighted by some kind of sickness. Either that or they're just dirty hippies under the influence of hallucinogenic substances. I can only hope that this message will bring rescue. Until then, please, pray for me.
And what do you believe? Hi, RadAwesome27 back here for yet another wonderful video. Today we're talking about when and where is the classified 5 map. There's no certain way of knowing, but there's enough evidence to suggest from both these users that these could be where the map takes place and when. I want to bring your attention to how Ascension's phones also changed as well from Zombie Chronicles. Many people believe Ultimus was in Zombie Chronicles. I'm not sold yet, especially because the characters themselves, their models changed dramatically. Now, Treyarch may rewrite them as Ultimus, but originally the crew we knew, the original crew, is not we experienced in Zombie Chronicles until Treyarch tells us otherwise. It's even suggested that Zombie Chronicles exists inside the summoning key. The radios from Monty even make it seem like our characters are learning about themselves, or their fractured selves. Remember, fractured dimensions are the causes of 115 messing up storylines and causing these alternate realities with things slightly or drastically different than what we are familiar with. Jason mentioned that this classified map will be a prequel to 5 in the Pentagon, so it's interesting to think about how Gersh could be implemented on this team, but how come he never came up in the character dialogues in the original game? The most obvious reason could be Gersh is one of those beings like Samantha that exists outside the world until they're saved. Because of what happens in the original Ascension, and he gets sucked into the Gersh device by Yuri, who, by the way, becomes a Pentagon thief after he gets sucked into the Gersh device by Samantha. Gersh is now this little ball of light we release at the end of the Ascension Easter egg, only to see again in GK. And then we hear in Ascension Radio from Dr. Monty in Chronicles that he actually went around with the group while Richtofen was running off. And even better, that gives us a perfect opportunity to explain that Richtofen actually went to Moon to set up Richtofen's grand scheme while our characters were off doing something else in between maps. But which maps? Is it Kino to Ascension? Is it Ascension to Call the Dead? Is it Call the Dead to Shangri-La? Or is it Shangri-La to Moon? Because we have character outfits that change dramatically. From Kino to Ascension, Richtofen has a spacesuit. From Ascension to Shangri-La, all of a sudden our characters go from disgusting, beat up, ripped, and damaged to perfect. They look like their classic clean uniform. And then obviously Moon, we have the spacesuits. Let's listen to those Ascension radios though. The difference from the original version, which was taken from Carbon Fiber. He's been a huge contributor to the zombie community, and I'm pretty sure he worked for Treyarch for some time, so please check out his original videos, linked in the description. And now, listen to just some of them, there's a lot more, of the radios from Ascension in Zombie Chronicles.
Hi, Takeo. Yeah, how you doing? See all the puke that we're picking up? You're not saying thank you? Nothing? You know why? Because you're a little shit.
Need some beans for the chowder here. Come to me. The revolution dies without Fidel Castro.
Notice how it went from 5 quotes to the quotes in Call of the Dead. When our characters were stuck inside the closet, per se, or inside the MTD, in the Siberia outpost of sorts, this could indicate the fracture. Even when the phone starts, you hear this weird whistling sound that you didn't hear in the other phones. This could be our fractured timeline or universes being rewritten. Based off the Zombie Chronicle Ascension radios, we may be able to place our characters before Ascension, where the events of 5 get set up with even Gersh or Richtofen. Either or could still work, but Gersh ends up getting erased from our memories because of the distortion that goes on in our zombie storyline. Some more items to point out inside 5 is we have Richtofen's painting and Dempsey's painting on the other side of the wall, inside the Pack-a-Punch room on 5. That explanation could be solved due to the classified map of why those paintings are up there. A classic explanation is during the Derice massacre, which was in the Black Ops 1 terminal. You can check out a link to that video explanation below. The groups from Russia and the United States fought over all the Derice research. They split up that research, and what they took from Derice, they applied to 5, and that allowed them to make prototype MTDs we see in Windows, ray guns, the Winter's Howl, and yes, even the teleporters that we find across the map. Richtofen's painting and Dempsey's might have been those seized at the facility, then mounted on the walls. But it doesn't quite make sense why they were mounted on the walls even after the fact. And to the commenter's point about Gersh being the blacked out person, that would make a lot of sense. It would be a great way for the revisionist history of Treyarch to actually make sense of all these unanswered questions from the past. Where do I think Classified takes place and when? The option I like the most is Classified takes place before Ascension, where we are actually running with Gersh during a timeline in which our characters' minds will get erased because Gersh is part of this dimensional collapse. Realistically, though, I see all 4 of our characters on a version of 5 where the art style has changed, as Jason hinted in the panel, to be before the events that occur in the labs. And that timeline, if it's just normal, could directly lead right into 5, where 5 also occurs at the same time as Ascension. Remember, Monty says it, Craig Houston says it, and Jason Blundell says it.
Here's the thing. You have which you experience things doesn't necessarily reflect the order in which they happen.
For people who are driven by narrative and our kind of storytelling, it's also important not to tell it in order, but for it not to be timey-wimey for the sake of it, if you will.
Yeah.
The order in which we experience the maps are not the order in which they occur. So if you go Kino through Moon, that might not actually be the correct timeline in which we're traveling from place to place. At this point, I believe Jason and Craig have rewritten it in a way that have rearranged when what maps occur. And then if the lines are out of order, you can blame that on 115 Delusions. Once I get back from my European trip, I really am interested in trying to figure out what the real order of the maps are despite the timeline. We did have to organize them, right? But there's so much going on outside the timeline. As Jason put it in the recent panel, the negative space is just as important. Tell me when you think Classified takes place. I absolutely adored your suggestions, and I would love to see if anyone else has awesome perspectives to add to the table. Figure out when Classified is going to take place before, most likely, its reveal trailer at Comic-Con. It's always fun to figure out before it happens in this type of speculation. Make sure to subscribe if you enjoy these videos, like and do all that stuff everyone annoys the crap out of you with, so I won't bother you any longer. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!